Denny, do you recognize that guy? I don't recognize Doug.
I think it's D.A.K., Doug, the producer, who twirls all the knobs.
The infamous D.A.K.
That would be me.
What does the A stand for, Doug?
Awesome.
No, oh, God.
You knew that was coming. You knew that was coming.
I'll guess Alan?
Andrew.
Andrew, okay. Doug Kaplan, producer extraordinaire for the Ultimate Rock Podcast. The birthday man, right over here to my left.
Our birthday edition today.
And like women, we're not going to ask you how old. And my birthday's coming up in about a month, and we're not going to ask me how old either. It's Denny Somack to my left, Doug Kaplan running the controls, Doc Reno here. This is the Ultimate Rock Podcast, podcast number 3. When we wrapped up podcast number 2, I asked Denny if we could talk about his Beatles book, because I find it to be just a great book. And it's called A Walk Down Abbey Road. And this is, you were just telling me before we started here, this is like you put the street sign on the book because it's the most stolen street sign anywhere in the world, if you really think about it. Can you imagine how many bars, like old dive bars all around the world, probably stole that sign, and they've got it somewhere like in, Australia somewhere, down in Key West or what have you?
Now, fortunately, there's a couple of NW8 Abbey Roads. Not a lot, but there's a couple of them. And it was so bad. The signs just used to be, nailed into the brick. And now they had to have it set and cemented. Yeah. They're trying to cut down the stealing of the sign.
Right. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. And, what we love about this podcast and why we decided to put it together is because with me doing radio a long, long time, I'm not going to also say how long, but too long, and doing rock radio for years and years and years, and just being a fan of rock and roll, between myself and Denny Somack here, who's been hosting and producing rock radio shows for most of his career, and between the two of us, I mean, we could sit here, we could do a podcast on how many people we have met over the years, interviewed, hung out with, you name it, some of the greatest artists of all time. And unlike a lot of other rock podcasts, no disrespect, we present the stories and we let the artist and the people we're talking about actually tell the story. And that's because you just have like a treasure trove of just audio and video of some of the most infamous rock stars ever walked the face of the planet. And today we're going to talk about the book. And why don't we real quick here, not to change gears, but just kind of tell people, what was your idea behind this book? You wanted people to basically tell their stories about the Beatles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I collect stories, as you know. That's all I've been doing for the last 35, 40 years. And, of course, I started collecting Beatles stories years ago. And for a period of time, I was producing a radio show called Ticket to Ride with Scott Muni. It was on for like 10 years. And we used to have people come in, like Billy Joel and Elton John, play their favorite Beatles songs. And I would always just collect and collect. And anytime I would do an interview of any kind, I'd say, you got any good Beatles stories? Because I knew everybody had one.
Sure.
Everybody but Jeff Beck.
Really?
Think of it, yeah.
Wow.
He wouldn't give me a story. Anyway, so I've been collecting them, and people would write, over the years said, hey, I know you talked about the Beatles to all these people, but we only get to hear bits of it. And I said, I got a lot of stuff that we didn't air anywhere. I'll do a book. And that's how it came about.
That's very cool. Well, anyway, we have something on the doors. We've got a story from Joe Perry today. He just celebrated a birthday a couple days back. And also Led Zeppelin. We have
our Led Zeppelin story for the week.
I told
you we're going to do one a week.
We always have to finagle a Led Zeppelin tweak somewhere in the podcast. And one of the things that we will talk about, besides the book and the stories, but we just have a dynamite lineup of rare interviews from some of the biggest names. And
we're just going to give you the good parts.
Yeah.
You don't have to sit through. But also, it's not the 25 seconds you would hear in a radio show.
Right.
These will go.
When you first gave me this book, I looked through this. I was sitting on my couch one day. There was a ball game on, and I was half interested in it. And I started paging through this. I kind of pick and choose. I wanted to read Jimmy Page. There was the Rolling Stones, definitely.
Right.
And I just wanted to know, I read some of the stories, and now I'm reading the book. And it's just fantastic. I was bragging to some family this morning about the book. I told them, I said, yeah, I'm doing the podcast later. It's Denny's birthday, and we're going to talk about his book because I want to talk about the book. So, Denny, let's get started. What do we have for this show today, this Ultimate Rock podcast?
Well, as you know, Doc, after we finish recording, we like to try and say what we're going to do next week, but we don't know because I go home and I scour the archives and I say, oh, Doc's going to love this one and that one. Oh, I forgot about that. And so anyway, I happened to be listening to The Doors, something I do every once in a while. Love The Doors. And I thought we should start the show by talking about them because I found a couple of things that I thought were interesting. And I noticed that we're coming up on the anniversary of the release of L.A. Woman, anniversary of Jim Morrison's death will be coming up. His birthday's in December. Just a lot of stuff going on. And the Doors are still played today. I mean, they still sell 1 million albums a year. Can you believe that? Yeah,
it's funny. I was going through some old photos, and it's funny that we're going to talk about Ray Manzarek today because I found a photo of me with Ian Astbury when they did the 21st Century Doors. Yeah. I found the photo.
Oh, great.
So I've interviewed Ray on the radio. I've interviewed Robbie Krieger on the radio, but a chance for me to actually get to meet them. This was probably about 15 or so years ago, maybe 18 years ago. It was just really awesome. And, and I agree with you. And you and I have talked about this when we're not doing a podcast that, Ray Manzarek to us was really the heart and soul of the Doors. It really, Jim Morrison, don't send me hate emails, but the sound, that iconic sound from Ray Manzarek.
Oh, absolutely. It's the most famous organ solo in rock, maybe next to Whiter Shade of Pale.
Yeah.
Right? Those are the two that everybody remembers?
I would agree with that.
Okay. Anyway, so I had a chance. I first got to know him. I did the official, I think it was the 15th anniversary radio show for The Doors. And they were releasing some live albums and doing some stuff. So I go out to California and I spent about a week with them. And their manager, a guy named Danny Sugarman, and that's a story for another day. That guy's a character.
Yeah, he is.
And plenty of stories about him. He wrote his biography called Wonderland, which is pretty interesting. This guy was 15 years old, and he went to work for The Doors answering their fan mail and ended up being their manager.
That's amazing. I did not know that.
Yeah. So anyway, the spring of 71, Morrison moved to Paris after finishing the L.A. Woman album, the sixth album by The Doors.
Right.
July 3rd, he was found dead in the bathtub by his girlfriend, Pamela Courson. And there are various conspiracy theories to this day. Other rumors include him faking his death. And I know the old road manager, Bill Siddons, who was sent from L.A., had to fly to Paris to check the casket. And the stories are... Anyway, we'll save that for another day when we're doing a Jim Morrison thing.
Okay.
But anyway, so Morrison was 27 when he died, and that, in fact, puts him in the famous 27 Club.
Right.
Which, if you don't know, if you're not familiar, the 27 Club is a term that came up because of all the tragic coincidences in rock and roll. The item applies to, musicians including Jim Morrison, who died at 27.
Right.
Janis Joplin, who died at 27. Brian Jones, same thing. Jimi Hendrix. Robert Johnson, the old blues guy. Pigpen from the Grateful Dead. Kurt Cobain.
Amy Winehouse.
And a few others. And they passed away at the age of 27. So they call it the 27 Club.
Wow. Well, anyway, The Doors, one of the most influential bands of all time. Yeah, that's a long list of 27. I was trying to think of another one, but I'm sure there's probably one we don't know about. But Jim Morrison was the voice of The Doors, and Ray Manzarek, as we were saying earlier, the signature organ playing the heart and soul of the band. And you had an opportunity with Ray?
Yeah,
what happened?
When I did this anniversary thing and I got to know Ray, and then over the years when I would go to L.A., I'd go and have lunch with him and his wife, Dorothy.
That's amazing, Denny. That really is.
He's just such a nice guy. And at the time, he was producing the band X. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah. Punk band from L.A.
And they were also, one time, they were making the Doors movie. And I said to him, okay, Ray, it's just us here at lunch. What do you think about the movie? What'd you think? It was just come out. He goes, it was terrible. I hated it. And we're going to make our own someday. I said, "Oh, okay." So I don't know if that's ever been publicly.
Are you talking about the Val Kilmer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They must.
You didn't like
Something
it, huh?
must have happened. They said it was just it went off course, and they got really they disassociated themselves from it halfway through. And anyway, it's a long story. So anyway, I had the opportunity over the years to work with him and his wife, and I remember one of the best stories that he told me was, the one where he met Jim Morrison, because that's so weird. How did that happen? So, well, you know what, Doug, run that clip from Ray, will you?
At the time, I was playing in some jazz groups and with my brother's band, Rick and the Ravens, and we played bar gigs, a place called the Turkey Joint West in Santa Monica. And guys from the film school would come down, and we'd have jam sessions. I'd invite them on stage. Paul Ferrara, hey, Paul, come on up. Hey, Jim, come on, man, sing a song. And Jim would come up and sing Louie Louie with my brother's band. And about a week or two before graduation, we didn't know what we were going to do. I said, hey, Jim, what are you going to do, man? He said, well, I'm going to New York. I said, oh, too bad, man, because I was really starting to dig the guy. He was a lot of fun, good guy to be around with, and a real intellect. So about a month and a half after that, sometime in the middle of July, I'm out on the beach getting some sun and down there in Santa Monica in Venice, California. And who comes walking down the beach but Jim Morrison? I said, hey, man, I thought you were going to New York. And he said, no, I've stayed out here and I've been writing some songs. I said, really? I knew he was a writer and a poet. I said, songs, huh? Yeah. Well, can you sing one for me? Just sing it. And he sang Moonlight Drive.
Oh, wow.
When I heard those lyrics, man, let's swim to the moon, let's climb through the tide, penetrate the evening that the city sleeps to hide. And as he was singing, I could hear all the things that I could do behind it on the keyboards and the shape the song could take. And I said, God, let's get a rock and roll band together. And he said, that's exactly what I want to do.
So that's Ray Manzarek on meeting Jim Morrison. I didn't get a chance to see the original band, but I did see the band with Ray and guitarist Robbie Krieger when they toured in the early 2000s as the Doors of the 21st Century. Doc, did you ever run into any of the Doors?
Yeah, I mean, I've met them a couple times, Robbie and Ray only.
Right, you mentioned.
And the show, the 21st Century Doors show, I thought Ian Astbury was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't really expect much. I actually thought and planned on, I hate to admit this, I have a reputation sometimes that if I go to a concert and you start to lose me, I leave. And I really thought I was going to check out about 5 or 6 songs. And then I ended up staying for the whole show.
Yeah.
And then I saw somebody I knew at the venue where it was an outdoor amphitheater, and I got invited backstage.
Great.
So that was a really cool. And I'm like you. I'm a big Ray Manzarek guy. And it's just an honor to meet him.
Yeah, it really was. And not only did I see the Doors of the 21st Century with Ian Astbury, they then there was a legal problem, and the drummer, John Densmore, sued them for using the Doors name. So they had to change it, and they decided to go out as Riders on the Storm. And they had the guy from Fuel, Brett Scallion, was the vocalist, and he was tremendous too. But I got a great story about when I saw them at the Tower Theater in Philadelphia. And after the concert, I wanted to go back and say hi to Ray and tell him how much I enjoyed the show. So I'm heading back, and I run into his brother Ray, who's Ray from his brother Rick, who's of course Rick from Rick and the Ravens. So I knew the whole story. He goes, "Oh, I'm Rick Manzarek." Oh, I hadn't met him before. I said, "Well, I'd like to go back and say hi to Ray. Do I need a backstage pass or anything?" And he looks at me, and he goes, "Are you kidding? It's 1969. There's no such thing as a backstage pass." And I realized these guys haven't toured since 1969.
Right.
So I go backstage, and it's like the incense and it was like 1969.
Oh, wow.
I just cracked up. Holy mackerel. Anyway, we got to move this on. But we're going to devote a whole show to the Doors because I got plenty of stuff on them. Okay. Anyway, I wanted to play our Zeppelin story for this episode, and it's Joe Perry of Aerosmith, big Led Zeppelin fan, as you can imagine. And when I was working on my Get the Let Out book, I contacted. I don't really know him. I'd met him once or twice, but I called his people. And I said, I'm doing this book on Led Zeppelin, and I got all these different people, and I don't have anything from Joe Perry, and I want to make sure that he has the opportunity to be in the book. Would somebody let me know and call me? Within 24 hours, I get a call. Hey, Denny, this is Joe Perry from his studio up in Boston. He goes, what do you want to know? I want to tell you everything. I love Jimmy Page, one of my best. And he goes on and on and on. So, you know what? I said, well, how did you first meet him? Play it.
I met him. We were both staying at the same hotel when they were doing that run at the Garden, and we were on tour, or we were recording. I'm
1977,
not sure which.
Boston Garden.
Walking into Jimmy, he was wandering around the halls at 4 a.m, and we bumped into each other and hung out for a while. And he invited me to the show, and we went to the show the next day. He was in. At that point, they were really, starting to reach that point where they were really putting out amazing records, and their shows would sometimes last, 2 to 3 hours, and taking really long solos and things like that.
Was that the Boston Garden or Madison Square?
Madison Square Garden.
Okay,
it was the 5 run of shows in '77 that was legendary.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that. All right, real quick, my 15 seconds of fame. I'm in an Aerosmith DVD. You Gotta Move from 2004, and in there they came out with "Honkin' on Bobo," and we had we were in an iHeartRadio theater, and we had about 7,500 listeners. And I brought in Joe Perry, and he was there. He played, and he signed autographs. He couldn't have been nicer. And for like 10 seconds, 15 seconds in the DVD, there's me bringing in Joe Perry, and the crowd goes crazy. And that's ladies and gentlemen, that's my 15 seconds of fame. I made it in an Aerosmith DVD. It's Doc Reno with Denny Somack. Doug Kaplan is our producer. This is the Ultimate Rock Podcast. We are sharing some classic tales from the world of rock. And we also just go off the rails a little bit and tell side stories when we do this podcast. That's why this podcast is so much fun. Denny, I wanted to talk about the book, Walk Down Abbey Road. So how did that come about? What was the one thing that made you write this bad boy?
Okay. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I collect Beatles stories, and I like to share them with people. And I'm going to tell you the one that hit me so hard about a year and a half, 2 years ago that I said, "Oh God, I'm definitely doing this book." Was when I met the Isley Brothers. Okay?
Nice. Love them.
Now, I was in New York at Hendrix's Electric Lady Studios, and they were having a press conference. And it was Carlos Santana and his wife, Cindy Blackman, and the Isley Brothers. They had done an album together, if you remember. This was like 2 years ago. So they had a little launch, and I go in, and I'm interviewing, and I finish with Carlos, and the guy says, didn't know if I went with the intention of interviewing Carlos. I hadn't thought about the Isley Brothers, but somebody said, "Hey, the Isley Brothers are here. Do you want to talk to them?" And I said, "Well, yeah, they got Beatles stories. I mean, Twist and Shout, that's their song. I mean, that's, sure." So I go in, and I'm talking to 2 of them, Ron Isley and I can't remember the other one. It was the 2 main brothers that are still around, and they still are around and playing. And they start, I said, "So, tell me some stories. I know the Beatles, covered Twist and Shout, and they also covered Shout, which was another Everly Brothers tune. And this was at a time when the Beatles were, changing the landscape of music, and all the bands were concerned." And now, another thing that I knew, by the way, that a lot of people don't know, and I got to put that information here because it reflects on the story. Jimi Hendrix was in the Isley Brothers for 6 months.
I knew that.
Okay, you knew that.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was with Little Richard. He played with a lot of different people, but he was with the Isleys for 6 months. So we're sitting there, and I said, "Okay, so tell me, what did you think when you first, did you watch the Ed Sullivan Show?" "Yes." "Then you saw the Beatles do Twist and Shout?" He goes, "Yeah." We were like, "Wow." And, we thought, "Wow, what's going to happen?" And I turned to my brother and I said, this is going to kill a lot of these, like the Frankie Avalons of the world and the Bobby Rydells, and because these guys write their own stuff and they play their own instruments. And I just looked around. I said, I think we're going to be fine because we have a great guitar player in our band. So this is Ron Islington. So it goes, so I turned to Jimmy and I say, Jimmy, what do you think? And I said, wait a minute. What did you just say? You were watching the Beatles and Ed Sullivan. Yeah, we like everybody else. We were sitting in the living room watching the Beatles. And Jimi Hendrix was sitting next to you? Yeah, he was in our band. So he's sitting next to us.
Yeah.
So I said, Jimmy, what do you think? He goes, no, we got a sound and, we're going to be fine. And I thought, well, then there's a story.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix watching the Beatles and Ed Sullivan with the Isley Brothers. I thought, I haven't seen that one. So I'll put that down. And then it's the second or third story in the book. Anyway, and I also said, well, he said, did you ever meet any of the Beatles? And he said, well, it wasn't until several years ago that I actually finally met Paul. And we were playing some festival in upstate New York, and he was playing and came over to me and he goes, Ron, without you and your brothers, there'd be no Beatles. And that was my meeting with Paul.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so anyway. And then we got stories from Elton John, Billy Joel, Steven Tyler, whole bunch of people, which we'll talk about. But let's hear one of the stories. I think we have a Billy Joel story coming up.
On John Lennon?
No, this is actually on the Beatles themselves. I thought this was a better story.
Okay.
I really had no idea that it was possible to be a rock and roll star until the Beatles. Before the Beatles, there was either soul music, and I was a kid from Levittown, so what kind of soul did I have at that point? I wasn't aware that I had any. I thought you had to be from the ghetto in Philadelphia. And there were the manufactured rock stars, a Fabian or a Frankie Avalon, or the pretty boys who seemed to be put together by a Hollywood conglomerate with a lot of money behind them. And there was really no idea that you could play an instrument, write your own music, go out and perform it, and be big at it. It looked like that wasn't in the cards. And I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. They were these guys. They didn't look like they came from the San Fernando Valley. They looked like these four working class scruffs. John Lennon had this wise guy look on his face, just like me and my friends were just a bunch of wise guys, street kids, playing their own instruments, doing their own arrangements, writing their own songs on TV on Ed Sullivan next to Roberta Peters or whoever else was on. It made it all possible. It made it all conceivable. That's what I want to do. I grew up with them. I mean, as I got older and I changed, they changed. And it was a big part of life. That was a big deal about the 60s.
If you think about Billy Joel, especially in the younger days, he was not like the typical looking rock and roll star. Still isn't. And the fact that he could tell a great story about that, and that's how he was influenced to do what he did. It kind of reminds me of like a long time ago when Tom Petty met Elvis, and he was 8 years old. And he traded his Whammo slingshot for some 45s, and we ended up getting Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. What a great story from Billy Joel. All right, Denny, who else do we have? Steven Tyler, right?
Yeah, Steven Tyler is in the book, Heart's in the book, Rolling Stones, Isley Brothers, Phil Collins, Jimmy Page, Pete Townsend, on and on and on. But the Elton John piece, and originally I was going to play one where he just talks about writing Empty Garden, but then I realized, wait a minute, I got this longer clip, and I don't remember. It's in the book, but I don't think it's ever been played anywhere. So this is Elton John.
Made Whatever Gets You Through the Night, and I sang on another track on Walls and Bridges. And Tony King, who worked for Apple at that time, who was looking after John, who now looks after Mick Jagger, said, introduced us. And I played on it and sang on it. And we made a sort of, not a really hard bargain, that if it got to number one, he would come on stage. But he kept his bargain. I've never met anybody more thoughtful. You read in the books that John was very cruel and had a very cynical sense of humour, and I've seen that side of him too, and the crazy side of John. But underneath it all, I was with him at a particularly crazy period for him and for me, and I never saw anything else but kindness, and I kind of get a little, for him, he's sacred to me. He absolutely doesn't, he's the only person in this business that is totally 100% sacred. And even if I'm doing bad things to myself, or if I'm being totally miserable and morose and being unreasonable with people, I sometimes think, oh my God, John, you're going to give me if there is a big pearly gates there, you're going to be standing outside it and giving me the biggest lecture, because he's the only person in this business I've ever looked up to. The only person.
Wow.
That's great to hear how Elton John first met John Lennon, and that happened to be during the time he was with May Pang.
Okay.
And he did, on that deal he was talking about, and if you're not familiar, it's actually coming up on the anniversary. He got, Elton John was playing Madison Square Garden, I think it was Thanksgiving of 75 or 74. I'll look it up. Anyway, and Whatever Gets You Through the Night had gone to number one, and Lucy in the Sky had gone to number one, and John Lennon happened to be at the Garden, and Elton introduced him, and they did 3 songs together.
Wow.
And it was recorded, and it wasn't released till years later. It's on the box set.
Okay.
The live recordings from Madison Square Garden.
And, of course, Elton mentioned that he's going to be coming back on tour himself here.
Right.
January of 2022. He is really being COVID-19 cautious.
Yeah. Did you see Rocket Man?
I'm embarrassed to say no, I have not. And for the record, I'll come clean right here. I have yet to see Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm terrible.
You're the only guy I know that hasn't seen that one.
You know, I've given away movie passes on my radio shows for both.
Oh, you got to.
But I never snagged a pass and went to see it myself. I'll have to work on that.
You can skip Rocket Man, but don't skip Bohemian Rhapsody.
You know what's funny is that since I'm a member of SAG-AFTRA, you know, when it comes around to the award shows like the Golden Globes and all that.
Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. It's the union.
Yeah.
Just for those
Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Radio, Television Arts, SAG-AFTRA. And the nice thing when you're in SAG-AFTRA, it's a union for just about anybody in the entertainment business. They send you copies of, you know, they'll send you a DVD. Hey, we need your vote for Bohemian Rhapsody. Here it is.
Screener. They call it a screener.
Yeah, so I get tons of these every year. And so I have both Rocket Man and Bohemian Rhapsody on DVD at my house. And one of these days, now that I'm doing this podcast with Denny, and I'm being embarrassed here because for a rock jock with iHeartRadio, I haven't seen these movies. Anyway. We have another really interesting story. I mean, we could talk forever about the Beatles, but let's go to Larry King.
Yeah, well, here's the deal. Larry King, a very good friend of mine. Larry actually started his broadcast career at WQAM in Miami as the newsman.
Nice.
And what happened was he's the only newsman to accompany the Beatles. In fact, he's the one that's featured in the documentary 8 Days a Week, and his interviews are used in that special, and Larry's in the movie, and he did new interviews. And
interesting.
He was telling me stories. I was having such a great time hearing these stories. Anyway, Larry has given us a couple things for us to use here to help promote the book. And there's an interview with Larry in the book, and it's the only one done with him since 8 Days a Week came out. So he gives all the background and what happened, and the premiere in London, the premiere in New York, and meeting Ron Howard, and the whole bit, the inside scoop. It's all in the book. Anyway, so Larry happens to have the last recorded interview on film of Lennon and McCartney as Beatles in 1968. They came over to America to start Apple. Larry got in touch with them and got one of the few, I don't really know of any other interviews they did. In New York City, he went, and they were setting up Apple, and he gave me a little clip. And the reason I want to play this and have you watch it, it's or listen to it either way, but it's John Lennon and Paul McCartney talking about what they're going to do with Apple. And John Lennon does something here that never occurred to me till just recently.
Okay.
He makes a prediction. Remember, this is 1968. Because Larry asks him, well, so the days of the Beatles playing all over? And Lennon goes, well, you never know. We may come zapping in by satellite someday. Nobody knew anything about satellite conscious back then. But
funny he
anyway,
would say that.
Play that, would you?
Gentlemen, it's good to see you again.
Nice to see you, Larry. Nice to see you, Larry.
Lovely. What is Apple, John?
It's a company we're setting up which involves records, films, electronics, which make records and films work, and what's it called, manufacturing?
Yeah, it does a few things.
You know, the byproducts that end up with Larry Page T-shirts and that.
It's just trying to mix business with enjoyment.
Pleasure.
We're in business, you know. We find ourselves in business.
Are you the
We're trying to
directors?
make it-
Are you the directors
Yeah.
of this?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
like all the profits won't go into our pockets. They'll go to help people, but not like a charity.
What do you plan?
You'll see how
Somebody
it
wants
works.
to make a film and they go to a company and they get shown into the waste paper bin and nothing ever happens, so they go around, they make an underground one and it goes round and round underground and a lot of people never see it.
I see.
So if they come to us, they won't stand a chance. But we hope to make a thing that's free where people can just come and do and record and not have to ask could we have another microphone in the studio because we haven't had a hit yet.
I see. How expansive, how large will this be here?
Oh, well, like that.
How large will it be in America?
We don't know yet, you know. It'll be big, I think.
We're just blowing up the balloon.
There's lots of things, you know. We just got a friend of ours who's in electronics.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you about this chap who's called Alex. And he's great. He's a Greek fella.
It's that guy
And
Magic
he-
Alex that they talk
he's
about in
invented
Beatle
incredible
lore.
things, you see. So that'll be big.
Well, are the days of the Beatles on stage over?
Well, they've been over for the last 2 years because we've been on land. But you never know, do you? With all these incredible electronics, we might come flying over New York playing one day.
That's amazing he would say that back then.
I know.
That's incredible. Doc Reno here with Denny Somack. It's the Ultimate Rock Podcast. Each episode, we just go through some really great artifacts in audio and video that we find, and we present to you a Ultimate Rock Podcast. That's what it's all about, some of the greatest stories in rock and roll. And if you like what you're hearing, tell a friend, check out our website. We do have a website. We're working on that now, ultimaterockpodcast.com. We're putting together a Facebook and Instagram page. This is only episode number 3. 3 of many, trust me, coming down the road. And you can also get some information when a new episode is released. We'll share that with everybody on our own social media and the podcast social media and website as well. So before we get out of here, and by the way, it's Denny's birthday, so we do have to go in a little bit. Before we leave,
Want to mention that I did hook up. You can email us now at hello@ultimaterockpodcast.com, or they can send. You have a couple of places.
yeah,
right?
you can hit me up at docreno@iheartradio.com, and that works, or any of my social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook. I'm on Instagram as Radio Jock Doc Reno. Really stupid story that I'm not going to bore you with on that one. I'll tell you off air.
All right.
All right. But anyway, yeah, thank you very much. And again, here's the book, A Walk Down Abbey Road. Denny Somack, rock historian and author extraordinaire. Doug Kaplan, our producer. Never fails, Doug. I always hit the table. You notice that?
Yeah.
Like that.
And I'll be back looking through the archives once again, and I'll have another episode ready very soon.
We pride ourselves on bloopers and all. We just let it roll. So anyway, for Denny Somack, Doug Kaplan, I'm Doc Reno, the Ultimate Rock Podcast. Keep rocking. We'll talk to you next time. Right in the ballpark. Okay, so we have a couple minutes. Well, I think we should start with Judas Priest's Rock Ball.